lot of the things you loved around that age are things you still love to this day. So it's a very pure place in your life. It's very powerful to go back and revisit your 10-year-old self, because that kid has information for you. Mm-hmm. That kid has direction for you. The second part of my answer would be this. When people are looking to discover what their purpose is in this life, I believe strongly that we are all born, we come to the planet with the tools that we need to really rise up into our purpose. I think activation happens at a different time for all of us, and there are triggers. There are things that trigger our activation into our purpose. But we're all born with the tools that we need to really become who we're meant to be in this life. So you look at what your natural talents are. What am I naturally good at? What do I just have a penchant for? What am I just naturally gifted at? And that is a huge clue as far as what you're here to do, what you're here to contribute. And anytime, let me throw this in there as well, anytime you do something that you're passionate about and that you love and that you're naturally good at, you're going to love that. You're going to be emanating all kinds of positive energy. You're going to be giving off all kinds of positive vibes, and then you're going to be coming into prosperity, because that's what happens. When you're really passionate about doing something you love because you're good at it and you just like it, you give off positive energy, and positive energy attracts prosperity. And so it's this kind of beautiful formula that anybody can really apply. So that's my answer.
Great advice.
That's really kind of entertaining, because when I was 9 and 10 years old, because I was thinking about it while you were saying that, 3rd and 4th grade, both of those years, I was sort of spontaneously elected as the president of the class. And the other thing that I was spontaneously elected to do was I always got to be the host for, like, the talent shows and all those things. So it wasn't so much that I had a talent as much as I was the MC for these things. So it's kind of funny now, in retrospect, right? That's a really interesting exercise. The only thing that I would add, and I'm going to let Zita kind of jump in with this too, is I think it goes back to something I said earlier, that we get taught what we're not supposed to be, but nobody really allows us to be what we are. Mm-hmm. And I think a big part of that process for all of us is simply saying, okay, what the heck am I? And then you have to feel it's all right to express it. I mean, I'm kind of a weird hybrid of I'm like a goth jock. And you can sort of imagine what that really looks like. So I'm like the kid that looks like, the long black coat and black fingernails, as well as the captain of the football team, sort of morphed together. But each of those aspects of me is legit. I mean, it's really who I am. And so one doesn't always go with the other one, but I'm both. And I think the thing is, I like being both. So for everyone, my advice to all of you is say, hey, I'm going to rock wherever I am. I don't care. I'm going to be a goth jock because that's what I am, right? And that's all right. And Zita, what would you say to people with that question? Because I want your input on this too.
Yeah, I think part of it is your own natural growth pattern. I think a lot of it has to do with your self-esteem. If you can develop your self-esteem, and if you can assure yourself that you know who you are as a human being, regardless of what your gift is, because everybody has a gift of something. If you're positive with your gift, and if you're positive with your self-esteem, the rest will fall into place. But it's one of those you have to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk. So if you need to find a support system, you need to find a support group, which can be difficult, but they're out there if you look for them. And they will help you develop that self-esteem, and therefore that will also help develop your gifts.
I like that answer. I really love that answer. Can I add one thing onto it? Because I really super loved I super love that, Zita. It's so important, and it's so powerful and relevant to find, a support group. And you're right. You have to go out there and you have to look for it. only thing I would add is I really believe in calling in supernatural support, because when you reach out and you ask for supernatural assistance and you ask for supernatural direction and guidance, they can reach places we can't reach. They can do stuff we can't do. We're powerful, but they can do stuff we can't do. And they can also put the right people in your path at the right time. I'm a big believer. I've seen so much in my life and the lives of my readers and clients. Big believer in divine serendipity and divinely arranged connections and strategically placed people, and people who are kind of like flaming arrows sent into your life to facilitate change or to provide a direction or an opportunity or the support, as we're saying, that you need. So I love prayer. I love reaching out and asking for supernatural help. And, I'm all about manifesting. I'm all about that. But I'm also humble enough to know that there are some things and there are some times when we need to be humble enough to ask for help, especially if it's something we're serious about, especially if it's something real and because you need a support group and you don't know where you're at and you're kind of feeling lost and you really need some help because you don't want to feel like this is all there is to your life. I know that I just built a kind of a hypothetical situation, but I bet you a lot of our listeners tonight can maybe relate to that place. So when you are in that place, if you are in that place, it's so powerful to come into a place of humility and to enter a place of prayer and say, all right, if you can hear me, if I do have angels with me, can you help me out?
Right.
Make it happen. And I'm opening myself to that. And again, I've just seen so much, not only in my life, but in the lives of clients. So, yeah, that's powerful.
Well, and too, I can relate to, what you were talking about at the very beginning of the show when you were brought up with an intuitive family. My mother was extremely intuitive, and my sisters were all women in our family, so we all have it. But we also grew up Roman Catholic. So it was discussed in our family. I mean, I would come home and there would be tarot readers and mediums and tea leaves were out and tarot was out and the Ouija board was out. I mean, it was just that was our lifestyle. But you'd go to church and it was the opposite. It was everything that we believed in our home was shunned upon in the church that I was going to. So I remember sitting in religion class, talking to a priest, and he was saying that to pray to Saint, believe it or not, Andrew. And I said, I know.
That's just perfect. I'm
I know.
Sorry.
But it was, he was saying, okay, we need to pray to Saint Andrew. Yeah, exactly. And I said, but you told us that that's wrong because isn't he an angel? And he said, yes. And I said, but that's who I talk to at home. So why is it different that I can't pray to angels or talk to the angels at home, but I can here? And he said, because you aren't qualified. And at that,
oh, Lord.
Exactly.
Oh, boy.
And I know a lot of us, people who grew up in that kind of environment, in the Catholicism, that this was all shunned upon. And I said, and I remember going home, and I remember breaking apart the prayer, Our Father. I said, how many places in here does it say ghost? How many places in here does it say spirit? And how many places does it say angels? And I said, they're all the same. And I gave it to him, and I turned around, and I walked out of his class, and I never went back.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of us have had that experience, and I mean, for me, if I'm being honest, and by the way, I also was raised very Roman Catholic, but in a very eclectic household, so it was crazy, because on Sunday there was church, and then there was, what we did the rest of the time, but I have to be honest with you, I think if I'm being completely honest, that's probably part of what closed me off to the idea of angels, for me, and prayer. That's probably what closed me off to it. And how unfortunate, really how unfortunate. But it wasn't until they came to me, I didn't go looking for it. I literally had I don't know where it came from. I didn't ask for it. It just started one day. And I will also say that my perception of angels was completely different than how they actually are. And a lot of that was based on my upbringing. Mm-hmm. And probably a lot of it was based on my own silly ideas. You know, to me, I thought they were now we're getting off on a completely different tangent, but hey, that's okay because we're just talking, right? But I don't know. I mean, I always had this idea that angels were very, whimsy-pamsy, very light, airy-fairy. I couldn't take them seriously. Mm-hmm. They weren't tough enough for me. They weren't serious enough for me. They weren't badass enough for me, if I can use that term. And I had no idea what I was talking about at all, you know, because they're the exact opposite. And it's very interesting, too, because there's a lot of misconception I learned, you know, since I started working with them. There's a lot of misconception about what they are, what they do, and what their function really is on the earth and in human lives. Mm-hmm. But I can completely relate to what you're saying and that shakedown experience you had with that priest, and I'm sure he was a little speechless. But that's a whole other show probably to itself, that whole debacle.
I've had that show.
That is the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
That debacle, if I can say that. But
yeah. But I think it's amazing.
Well,
I mean, and I think my point is you know, we were talking about self-discovery. Part of that was my self-discovery and knowing that what I believed in, I could count on. And whether they called it a different term, I knew what I had. And how we learned about angels and what we felt angels were is somebody from the next realm who could take your hand and walk you through the dark. That's how we believed angels were. And that's really what the spirit world is, I think. It's a part of your discovery. And if anyone, and I think women in particular, I don't know, maybe Andrew will disagree with me, but I think women in particular are they find it harder to identify themselves. And once you can identify who you are personally, again, the rest will fall into place.
I agree with that. I agree that it starts with really honing in on who you are, mm-hmm. you know, and that's a journey for a lot of people because, come on, life really indoctrinates us from a very young age.
Yeah.
And so I guess in a lot of ways, I don't know if you share this experience. I know that Andrew and I have talked about it, but I guess in a lot of ways that it kind of was a benefit then, you know, to be kind of like a loner as a kid because I never really was indoctrinated. And I'm grateful for that now. I'm grateful for those experiences. At the time, it was kind of miserable because when you're a kid, you want friends. But I'm really grateful because it sort of put me in the frame of mind that I need to be in order to do what I'm doing. And that kind of ties into my whole belief that we all have a purpose and we're prepared for it our entire lives. Mm-hmm. And when the time comes, somebody throws a switch and we clock in, right. you know, and we start to do what it is that we're here to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, yep. I agree with all that. You know, I mean, I agree with all that. I think that most professional psychics have had childhoods that were a little unusual. And mm-hmm. part of that, I think, is just what JoLynne's saying, is that we weren't socialized in the same way. There's not as many things to unplug because we didn't have them plugged up in the same way. Of course, in terms of getting along with the rest of the world, we're not in the same vibration, the same lockstep. So there's advantages and disadvantages that go with that. I mean, it's an interesting process how that evolution happens. Ultimately, it's about getting in touch with who you are. And I've talked about what I call the Big Bang Theory of enlightenment, which is we go through the experiences, right? Sometimes they're negative types of experiences, at least that's how we perceive them. But if you look at your history is very fluid because what was a disaster at the time, in retrospect, might have been like a tremendous blessing. You know, if I hadn't had this happen, who would have thought that breaking my leg was, that, because of that, all these wonderful things happened as a result, and I met my wife or whatever, and blah, blah, and when, things change. And so we